I hope this does not become confusing, but we have a separate video looking at the loaves and fishes as told in two chapters of Matthew. We have another one doing the same for Mark. But while I was making those, I noticed there's really another video here. How does Mark tell the first version and then Matthew retell it? And then how does Mark tell the second version and then Matthew retell that one? King James Version as always. And when the day was now far spent, his disciples came unto him and said, This is a desert place, and now the time is far past. Send them away, that they may go into the country round about, and into the villages, and buy themselves bread, for they have nothing to eat. He answered and said unto them, Give ye them to eat. And they say unto him, Shall we go and buy 200 pennyworth of bread, and give them to eat? He saith unto them, How many loaves have ye? Go and see. And when they knew, they say, 5 and 2 fishes. And he commanded them to make all sit down by companies upon the green grass. And they sat down in ranks by hundreds and by fifties. And when he had taken the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, he looked up to heaven, and blessed, and brake the loaves, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And the 2 fishes divided he among them all. And they did all eat, and were filled. And they took up 12 baskets full of the fragments, and of the fishes. And they that did eat of the loaves were about 5,000 men. All right. How many loaves? 5 loaves. He didn't ask about fishes, but they did have 2 fishes. 12 baskets of leftovers, and about 5,000 men. All right. So if you follow any of the channels that get into Bible scholarship, you've probably heard of the synoptic problem, but it's pretty well understood and accepted that Mark is the first gospel. Matthew and Luke both each had some version of Mark, and probably more so Matthew often retells Mark's stories in extremely similar terms. I haven't looked at Matthew's version in a while, but I hope I'm right. Just kind of start over if not. All right, so Matthew 14:15 through 21. And when it was evening, his disciples came to him, saying, This is a desert place, and the time is now past. Send the multitude away, that they may go into the villages and buy themselves victuals. But Jesus said unto them, They need not depart, give ye them to eat. And they say unto him, We have here but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. He said, Bring them hither to me. And he commanded the multitude to sit down in the grass, and took the 5 loaves and the 2 fishes, and looking up to heaven, he blessed and brake, and gave the loaves to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat, and were filled. And they took up the fragments that remained 12 baskets full. And they that had eaten were about 5,000 men, beside women and children. So that's a lot more than 5,000. I think in the other version, I try to estimate. If 80% of the men are married, that's 9,000 adults. And then the average number of kids for a married couple would be, but 10,000 would be more like it. Here it just says 5,000 altogether in Mark. But I don't think it's the changes that Matthew makes that are significant. It's how similar the language is. The day was far spent. It's a desert place. Send them away. No, it's going to be okay. How could it possibly be okay? 5 loaves, 2 fishes. There's another episode in First Samuel where David was allowed to eat the shew bread, and he got 5 loaves. 5 and 2 are 7. There are certain numbers that gospel writers definitely favor. They don't care about 8. They don't care about 4. 7. Why? I don't know. 7 days in the week. 12. 12 tribes of Israel, which itself is probably mythological. 12 months of the year. 12 signs of the zodiac, maybe. Now I'm way over my skis, as they say. But look how similar the language is in the details. Why people think any of this would be an eyewitness account, I don't know. Matthew always uses the third person, and on the day that he meets Jesus, he retells that story almost exactly as Mark did. What? Biggest day of your life, and you're still not going to, you're not going to let on that you are an eyewitness? They're not written as eyewitness testimony. That's just Christian apologetics being stubborn. Imagine that. Trying to have their way, just like they do politically. We don't like the results of the election, we storm the Capitol. We pretend that the election was stolen. We do whatever we need to keep the premise that everything in the Bible is the Word of God. It ought to be in the courtroom, it ought to be in the classroom. Have they ever looked at just this? The same story told among two gospels. Eyewitnesses? Right? Now, in Mark, it's, what is it, chapter 6 and then chapter 8. Now, maybe some apologists are trying to say it's the same story. Well, if it's the same story, why would they tell it twice? And why would the details change? It's not, you know, or I mean, if they're trying to say, no, it happened twice, and Matthew's just retelling it, but there's no recognition within either Mark or Matthew that it's happening again. It's just, yes, you have an oral tradition, like Lee Strobel was saying, but like the telephone game, it ends up like this. And the same authors, and were they single authors? By the time they were circulated, they were cleaned up by a lot of scribes. So maybe the scribes, I don't know how the scribes didn't notice this, especially when it's just in Matthew, it's consecutive chapters, and Mark, it's chapter 6, verses 8, with the same exact idea. And in this one, we're going to see that Jesus has compassion, right? In those days, the multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples unto him and saith unto them, I have compassion on the multitude because they have now been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away fasting to their own houses, they will faint by the way, for diverse of them came from far. And his disciples answered him, From whence can a man satisfy these men with bread here in the wilderness? What? So you have no remembrance of that miracle? And he asked them, How many loaves have ye? And they said, 7. And he commanded the people to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and gave thanks and brake and gave to his disciples to set before them. And they did set them before the people. And they had a few small fishes. And he blessed and commanded to set them also before them. So they did eat and were filled. And they took up the broken meat, that just means food, that was left 7 baskets. And they that had eaten were about 4,000. And he sent them away. So, same idea, but Mark has completely different details from his first retelling, right? 4,000 people, 7 loaves, a few fishes. I don't know why we're specific about the loaves and vague about the fishes, but watch how faithful Matthew is to this retelling of the second loaves and fishes miracle. Then Jesus called his disciples unto him and said, I have compassion on the multitude, because they continue with me now 3 days, and have nothing to eat. And I will not send them away fasting, lest they faint in the way. Remember, lest means so that this does not happen. And his disciples say unto him, Whence should we have so much bread in the wilderness, as to fill so great a multitude? Again, no memory of that miracle. And Jesus saith unto them, How many loaves have ye? And they said, 7, and a few little fishes. And he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. And he took the 7 loaves and the fishes, and gave thanks, and brake them, and gave to his disciples, and the disciples to the multitude. And they did all eat, and were filled. And they took up of the broken meat that was left 7 baskets full. And they that did eat were 4,000 men, beside women and children. Yeah, so Matthew, you can tell he's a little uncomfortable with the vagueness of Mark. Say, well, how many people were there? Well, he's probably just naming the men, and then we have to remind you they were probably traveling mostly. Most of them are probably traveling with a spouse, and many of them with children. But it's weird how some numbers have to be specific. The symbolic ones, 7, 12 maybe. But as far as how many people were out there, it was several thousand. Kind of do your own math. Wow. All right. So let's do Mark, Mark, and then Matthew, Matthew. All right. So again, here the disciples have to say, hey, it's getting late. We better send them out so they can get something to eat. We have five, they end up having 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and the leftovers are 12 baskets full. But here, it's a similar but decidedly different sequel. And here, Jesus has compassion. The disciples don't remember the earlier scene. Well, how are we going to do that? From whence can a man satisfy these men with bread here in the wilderness? Now they have 7 loaves and a few fishes. We like the number 7 symbolically, so we don't need a specific number of fish or fishes, as King James does. Meat is a general term for food. That's why you hear about sweetmeats. Those would be dessert breads. All right, and then Matthew retells Mark, and he also has the disciples giving Jesus the heads up. Jesus says, "No, we can feed them." They have 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and they take up fragments, 12 baskets full, not 11, not about 10. And then Matthew likes to make it a little more specific with the crowd, but not really. It's 5,000 men. He's just pointing out that wasn't the total number of folks. There were the associated women and children. But then, what, even there, you know that if it had been an eyewitness, who would have counted all those people? I mean, I could see counting loaves and fishes, 5,000. Okay, now the women. Get those kids to sit still for a while, will you? You know, it's not written as testimony or an historical account. Next time, Jesus has compassion. 7 loaves and a few fishes. Matthew, same thing. Jesus, I have compassion. They've been with me 3 days. If they don't eat, they're going to faint. Okay, what do we have? 7 loaves and a few fishes. So wild. Yeah, just trying to hang on to the idea that the Bible is the inerrant word of God. That's just a stubborn statement of faith. It has nothing to do with reading the text and letting it guide you. And you don't have to only focus on Jonah and the great fish or Eve being tricked by a serpent, God not being able to see. Where is Abel? Well, am I my brother's keeper? Um, just go right here with the Gospels. They're written as fantastically as anything in the Old Testament. Matthew and Luke used Mark as one source. They both retell what they want to retell. They make up birth narratives when they need to. They make up genealogies when they need to. Nobody tells the same passion narrative. The Gospels were not written to go into one book. That's just what happened. Every book in the Bible traveled separately for a long time. And then early church leaders put 4 Gospels together and rejected maybe 70 others. And a lot of them resurfaced. But let's keep this focused to just this. But same idea told in 4 different versions among 2 Gospels. Please like and subscribe. Check out the book Think Again on KDP Amazon.